Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to have you all here. Welcome to this focus forum on new civic leadership. My name is Dr. Wally Siewert. I have the privilege of being your moderator today. I'm the Director of Civic Engagement for Focus St. Louis. Before we get moving, I want to introduce someone hopefully many of you know, our Executive Director, Yemia Kande-Barch, to give us a few words of welcome.
All right, thank you, Wally. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yemia Kande-Barch, President and CEO of Focus St. Louis. I want to welcome you to our forum today. We are going to be talking to relatively new leaders in our region and assessing what our region needs, just based on some of their initial observations in their respective roles. I think many of you would agree that these are very interesting times, very challenging times, but I'd venture to say that these are inspiring times. So our conversation today is going to be with leaders that are out and about, that are talking to many of you in our region to help figure out the path forward. So looking forward to that conversation. Glad you could join us. Thank you, Wally.
There we go. Thank you, Yemi. Appreciate that. So this forum came about because we wanted to explore the part of the public sector that we don't see in the news as often. I have recently heard public health officials talking a lot about the fact that health outcomes are only determined to a small percentage by the actual healthcare system. And I think similarly, our public sector and our public debate and our public engagement in the public sphere are also only determined to a relatively small degree by the folks that we immediately associate with the public sector, namely those elected officials that are in office and that we see on the news all the time. So much of our society and our public sphere is shaped by leadership in quasi-public organizations that implement policy, direct community resources, and shape public debate, despite not being elected. I'm of course referring to leadership in the nonprofit, quasi-governmental, and community-involved corporate institutions in our region. In the past 2 years, since the beginning of the COVID era, we have seen an incredible wealth of new public sector leadership emerge at a variety of civically engaged institutions in St. Louis. At the same time, we're also seeing some of the biggest changes in our region's civic landscape in generations. Global pandemics, both of the viral and the social movement kind, have reshaped priorities for the region. Unprecedented amounts of federal aid are flowing into our region, and a reshaping of the political landscape via both formal reform, such as ward reduction coming up here in the city, and the kinds of public vitriol that's been on display at county council meetings, mean we have both an obligation and an opportunity to seek a new future for the region. These leaders can hopefully help make that happen. No pressure or anything. Now, before we get started, I also want to say we have a lot of leadership in the audience tonight. So we're also going to be asking for some feedback from the audience that we'll pull into the discussion at the end of the forum. So Matthew's going to post in the chat some links to some Mentimeter polling. Those are 3 short questions, 2 word clouds, and an open answer question to allow the audience to weigh in on our discussion for today. So Matthew, if you can go ahead and post those links in chat, all you've got to do is on some other device, your phone, or just open up a second window on your browser and go to menti.com, MENTI.com, and enter that 8-digit code that's in the chat, and you'll be able to take part in our ongoing digital feedback from the audience. We want to hear from you as well. Finally, I want to be sure to thank our sponsor. The Incarnate Word Foundation has generously supported these focus forums so we can continue to bring this level of quality programming to you free and open to the public. We are very grateful for their support. So a word about how we'll proceed with the conversation today. I'll begin by addressing a few questions to the full panel. I want to emphasize that not every panelist needs to weigh in on every question. I also have a few questions I will direct to specific panelists about their particular work. We welcome the audience to take part in the conversation, both in the Mentimeter that I just talked about, also in the chat, and we'll be reserving time at the end of the session to pull questions from all of those spaces to put to our panelists. So feel free to comment, ask questions, engage with each other. It's a great way to connect, especially with each other as audience members, since we can't all be in a room together. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists, and I'll ask our panelists to go ahead and turn on their video so that we can see their bright smiling faces. I will be introducing them only via their current title, because you can see more extensive biographies on the digital campus or on the event page, which you have hopefully had access to. We can post that link in the chat. So, in no particular order, please allow me to introduce Vanessa Cooksey, President and CEO of the Regional Arts Commission of St. Louis. Arrey Obenson, President and CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis. Dr. Dwayne Proctor, President and CEO of the Missouri Foundation for Health. And Karlos Ramirez, the Vice President of Community Engagement and Business Development at the Midwest BankCentre. Welcome to you all. In order to avoid me tripping over titles and names, our panelists have agreed to make it easier for me and allowed me to use first names on our panel this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Thank you, Vanessa, Dwayne, Karlos, and Arrey. I appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our first question. Where do you see the biggest potential for positive and equitable change in the St. Louis community? And what is attainable over the next decade? That's a huge question. And who wants to jump in there first?
All right, I'll take a shot at it. Obviously, it's a
Karlos.
huge question, but given my background, I really think that utilizing the people we have, the people is the life force of the region, and when I say people, I mean all the people, obviously the diverse populations that we have, and making sure that we're utilizing every bit of the community, international people, whether it be through the International Institute, specific organizations, of course, working with the Hispanic population, African-American population, thinking about the different civic organizations, the nonprofits, of course, United Way, working with that, including the arts, the different tourist attractions, all of this, keeping in mind that people looking into who we are, particularly because most of the news stories are negative. And I think really Explore St. Louis has done a great job of having some campaigns to talk about the positive, but we need to continue to have positive stories, and those are going to come from the people. And I think it's us investing, whether it be through education or through nonprofits, through banking, whatever the case may be. I think it's really investing on the people that are currently here. People, obviously the numbers for Missouri, we're losing population. But the people that are still here, the people that would have an interest in coming, that's who we need to focus on in order to continue to move forward as a region.
Great. So our population is our biggest resource, people and their stories. I love that point. Absolutely. Who else wants to weigh in on that one?
I was, Karlos, my good friend Karlos, you stole my answer. Because being a newcomer here, what I've seen is a lot of potential in the people. My background is one in which I believe that people are power, that power belongs in the hands of the people. And I think that what happens here in St. Louis and Missouri is clearly what's going on across the nation. But we've also seen people of goodwill and good intent stand up and take to the streets, for example, here. We've seen people of goodwill come together in forums like this, or fora like this, to stick with the Latin, right? To discuss about positive changes that can happen. I think when the people are organized, almost anything could be achieved. And it can be achieved in the name of fairness and justice for all that live here. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. But yeah, the power and the potential is right here in the hands of the people.
I appreciate that. I especially appreciate the point about people being organized. That's not something that often leaders sometimes in the public sphere want in some ways, right? They see that as a threat. So organizing folks to make their voices heard, absolutely. All right.
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity that we have is defining what the future will look like for ourselves and the generation that comes after us. Creating the opportunities for people to be engaged, for people to take ownership of what the future looks like. And it would not take one organization to do this. It really has to take the collaboration of all sectors of the community to continuously understand the changes that are happening around us, capitalizing on some of the opportunities and turning those capitalizing on some of the challenges, turning those challenges into opportunities is really how we're going to define the future. So what that means is that we have to give everybody the opportunity to be part of that process of defining what the future will look like. It would mean taking this conversations like this, to all sectors of society, at all levels of society, for people to see that this is not just about a certain group of people, but this is about all of us participating in building or designing what that future will look like. And I think that the opportunity is now, because this country has come out of 4 very challenging years, that we have to look at those challenging years as the opportunity to define what the future will look like. Do we want to be the country that looks like the challenges we faced in the last 4 years? Or do we want to be a country that will never go back to those kind of challenges? And if we want to be different, then how do we bring everybody along with us to build that future is what I see as the biggest opportunity that we have now.
Love that thought, defining our future. The arts play a big role in defining our future. Vanessa?
Yes, I just want to echo. I love that Karlos started the conversation about the arts, and clearly that matters. I think that our greatest opportunity also lies in the choices that we make. And I've taken on a mantra of you plus 2. We each have to account for what we need for our families and our communities. But I think as we are making decisions as leaders, the plus 2 is how are we allocating resources and choosing policies that support young people? Our youth need attention, and being intentional about thinking about what is the impact of this decision on young people and also on elders. We like to talk about, the population decline and people leaving the region, but all of us who are staying are aging. And I think that when we think about our different abilities as we continue to live, it really matters, and how we take care of our elders is important, because we too are on our way there. So as we are thinking, making decisions about policy across sector, about allocation of resources, ensuring that you have what you need, but your plus 2 is what's the impact on young people and what's the impact on our elders.
That makes sense. I'm going to stay on this question for a moment and challenge us a little bit. We've done the 10,000-foot view. What we need to invest in our people. We need to empower them to imagine and define a future that we want instead of one that we are railroaded into. Can we talk a little bit about more specifically how we do that? How do we invest in our youth? How do we get the elder population, which is growing, more engaged, more supported? How do we define our future or give people the opportunity and the power to define our future? Just going to ask you to drill down to maybe the programmatic level a little bit, or what are the specific things that we're thinking about doing in the region in order to empower people to take power over our future?
You know, Wally, I'm not sure that this is drilling down to the programmatic piece as much as you'd like, but I think at the end of the day, anything we're doing has to come with collaboration. You know, I really think that all of us, as we're investing in our people, I know for the longest time we worked in silos and we may have 3 organizations doing the same thing, you know, and I really think that while they can have nuances, I really think a lot more collaboration needs to happen, you know, and that includes all communities. Again, bringing back the diversity into it, but I think collaboration is really important in everything that we're doing. Of course, education, economic development is going to be huge to bring in other people here as well. But I think none of that will happen without the collaboration of the big organizations working together, bringing some of the smaller organizations into the fold. But even within the sectors, the arts need to work together, the different international communities need to work together, the health organizations need to work together, you know, and even the leadership organizations need to work together. And I think that when we work on this together and even cross, I mean, I believe in allies, you know, just because I'm Hispanic doesn't mean that I can't have other allies helping and collaborating with me in these initiatives. So I think it's reaching outside of our groups, but then always collaborating no matter what the programs are.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right.
Yeah, I would say we have to listen. We have to listen to the various perspectives out there. This summer, we spent 10 weeks listening to the community, and it was quite interesting what we were hearing. And we may see this community as more divided, but there is really much more unity in what the outcome looks like. We just come at it from different perspectives, and really creating the opportunities for everybody to be heard is really going to open our eyes and our minds to how common we are in how we want to see this community. And I don't know that, you know, if I'm originally from Africa, and in the context of the African mindset, you need to take it to the market square for people to participate. But we need to find where those market squares are. And the market square is open to everybody, and to take weave these conversations into every opportunity that we have to really challenge ourselves to say, what kind of St. Louis do we want to have 5 years from now or 10 years from now? And then create opportunities for everyone to play their part in you know, it's almost right like designing a community-wide branding campaign or marketing campaign for the community, so that it is, you know, at every organization, at every institution, it is part of the conversation that's going on. Deliberately, intentionally, it's going to be challenging, but it's something that has to be done for this community to achieve its greatest potential.
I love the thought that if we listen, we're a lot less divided than we think we are. Absolutely. Anybody else want to weigh in, drill down a little bit on how we empower folks in the region to imagine our future? All right, Vanessa, go ahead. Okay. Vanessa, you know you got something to say here. Go for it.
I know. I just wanted to share a specific example from the Regional Arts Commission. We are the largest public funder of arts and culture. And, you know, thinking about a quote from Arthur Ashe, you know, do what you can with what you have where you are. I probably butchered that, but it's mighty close. And an example of that is that we transitioned our program support grants to general operating support grants during the COVID pandemic last year. And while RAC has had significant impacts to our own organization, we knew that keeping the heat and lights on for our arts organizations so that they could present, and partnering with the Missouri Arts Council for Missouri Arts Safety Alliance so that we were, you know, masked and doing what we needed to do to keep arts alive during this very challenging period. I think that's where you get the most effective outcomes is when you're able to make decisions in real time about what do the people that you're serving need. And so recognizing that the program that they may have applied for the grant wasn't possible, don't take the money away. Shift how the money is being offered. Hey, use this for your light bill, use this for your mortgage. And so making decisions in real time that are helpful, I think really matters. And another thing that we're looking at investing in is public art. You know, what better way to bring people together from all over this region than around arts and culture. And so it's just thinking about what is my outcome and what decisions do I need to make and what resources do I need to bring to bear for that outcome to be a reality.
Love that point. Where is the marketplace? Anywhere people gather around public art, right? As a philosopher, my background, it's the agora, right? The Greek agora, where folks came to discuss their ideas. We need that open marketplace. I love that. So then let me move on. You've actually done a really nice segue into my next question. And it's about collaboration. You know, broad plans for regional, governmental, and institutional consolidation have not fared well in the region in the past. However, the need for regional alignment is clear if we're going to grow as a region. And one of the points that I often like to make about collaboration is everybody says it's fantastic, and they act as though when you collaborate, you're going to walk into the room and instantly the pie will be bigger and everybody's going to be happy with their slice. Well, guess what? That's usually not what happens, because when you collaborate, the first thing that happens is you have to give up something, namely control. So I'd like to put it out to you as leaders for some of our most influential organizations in the region. How can public sector leadership, all kinds of public sector leadership, work effectively and collaboratively across a diverse region? Because if anything, as Arrey pointed out, the narrative right now is about division. The desire is for collaboration. How do we effectively start pushing things in the other direction? What does it on the ground take to collaborate effectively? Some lessons from leadership.
You know, collaboration is one of the great tools that we use as change makers at the Missouri Foundation for Health. Collaboration is an acknowledgement by us that we have big, audacious goals that we're trying to achieve, but we can't do it by ourselves. And we need others to come along with us in order to do so. But when I say come along with us in community, not follow us, not be led by us, join with us. And but for me, when it comes to collaborations, for collaborations to be successful, the first move, which sometimes takes a while, is to start building relationships with the people you want to collaborate with before you have to collaborate. Right. Right. That means, right. If you wait until that moment when there's a grant opportunity or there is a crisis that we will turn into an opportunity, like Arrey said, right? If we wait until that moment to then say, okay, come on, let's go work together. Well, we don't even know each other. You know, we don't know our capacities. We don't know the barriers that each one of us may have as leaders in leading institutions. We don't know what opportunities are there. I'm not saying that we can't work together. I'm just saying that knowing those things helps us in building a relationship and taking the time to do so. Once you start building a relationship, then the focus should be on building trust, right? So that then we can trust each other. And then we take a look at what our values are. And see if we have mutually shared values. If we have a relationship, if we have trust and mutually shared values, there's not much more that we need to be successful. Now, Missouri Foundation for Health, we're very public about our values. We have 4 core values that we lean on. It's equity, it's commitment. I always forget, it's integrity, and it's humility. Okay. And that's what you get when you work with the Missouri Foundation for Health. We will hold that up to anyone and say, this is how we want to be seen in a room. This is how we want to enter a room. We are change makers and we want to work with other change makers. And I really do think that if we can come together around our shared values and trust, yeah, we can accomplish anything that needs to happen.
I really appreciate that point. Build the trust before you need it. Build the bridge before you need it. Absolutely. And come to that table, come to that space of trust with a sense of humility as one of those four. I really appreciate that point. Karlos.
Yeah, well, in addition to that, I think there has to be some vulnerability, because you're also opening yourself to criticism or to being exposed, so I think that you need to have your organization at a point where you're confident. I know when I was at the Hispanic Chamber, we really helped the Asian Chamber, any other chamber that approached us to help them as best we could. And people would ask me at times, how come you're helping them? Because going back to there's only so much, pie we're going to get. And am I losing some of that pie? And to me, it's like, I believe all rising tides lift all boats. And I think that as strong as they are, that's only going to help us. It's only going to help the region. So I think it's really allowing yourself to be a little bit vulnerable, but also making sure that your organization is flourishing and doing well, and so I think that sometimes you're going to have to search within and make sure that you're getting to a good place in order to start collaborating, and sometimes that's going to weed out some organizations. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing when we have, 50 silos in one area, and I think that it's okay not to have all of them there. But I think being vulnerable and being able to feel like you're doing the right things and be able to take allies with whatever you're trying to accomplish to make sure that we're doing well. Now with the bank, I think one of the things that I know many banking institutions were dinged with the Community Reinvestment Act that many banks were not investing in all the communities, and I think that our new chairman and CEO, Orf Kimbrough, has done a great job of really investigating, is that really true that we can't really work with these other communities? And he's employed very many different tactics to figure out how do we make sure that we're engaging the disinvested communities and still flourish and still make sense as a bank. Where at the end of the day, we're a capitalistic country, so we need to make money, but that doesn't mean you don't invest in Hispanic populations, in African-American populations, because I think there's still an opportunity. I've often told, when I first moved to the region, I would tell banks, whoever really starts figuring out how to start getting the I-10 community invested in banks, I think not only is it going to help the region, but also it's such an untapped market that bank is going to win. And I think that many banks have now followed suit and started implementing I-10 products. But I know Midwest BankCentre, we've committed $200 million over the next 5 years, specifically focusing on the disinvested communities, also faith-based organizations and nonprofits, because we really believe that by helping those communities, we're all going to rise together. And that's one of the taglines that we have, rising together. And I think that it's going to be really important that we're doing that.
Karlos, can you clarify? You said I-10 community or I-10 community, I-10 community. What are you referring to there?
So I guess to speak more plainly, it's really the undocumented community, the undocumented people in the country. And in order for them to be able to still file taxes and to be represented in financial communities, they have to get a federal tax ID number. And through that tax ID number, they are able to get mortgage loans, business loans, open bank accounts. And so I think that it also brings those people into the fold of the community and to be able to function within the community, which I think still helps with economic development in the region, is making sure that we're having that investment. We also put a couple of branches on the north side in Pagedale and another Baptist organization. And we actually measured it through a project through Washington University. And we learned that there were $11.3 million that were created because of that investment in those communities. And what's even more incredible about the bank is the money that was invested in those communities, we are actually lending more than is actually being deposited into the banks. And with that, we continue to raise our economic profile because of this giving back to the community. So some of it is challenging ourselves to think differently about some of this investment. And I think it's worked out really well for the bank, which was part of the reason that inspired me to make the transition from the Hispanic Chamber to Midwest BankCentre.
Absolutely fascinating. And I want to reiterate your first point that maybe the first step on the road to collaboration is actually internal. Right? It's a little self-reflection. It's a little getting comfortable with vulnerability. It's a little making sure your entire organization is on board and knows what to expect before you step out there. I really appreciate that point. Good. Vanessa.
I just have one quick thing to add as it relates to collaboration. Many of us have been on task force committees, teams that start out as a collaboration. And I think where it falls apart is not moving to teamwork with clearly defined roles. Who's the coach? Who's the player? Are we on offense, defense? Because once you get into a team, you've got a clear goal, you've got measures on how to win. And that, in our broader culture, we want to be on winning teams, and there's clarity on how to win the game. And so I think collaboration is the first step, but then transitioning into teamwork is really what makes and creates an environment for transformation and real impact.
A powerful point. Collaboration isn't just a bunch of people in a room. It has to create its own internal structure, right? It has to create its own internal lines of accountability. Absolutely. I appreciate that. All right.
Yeah, I'm just going to add that the way I have approached collaboration as a leader is really focusing on the outcomes. There are two kinds of people in collaboration. There are those that will focus on the outcomes, and there are those that are going to focus on the process. The process is always messy and challenging. And sometimes we run into this challenge in collaborating because we're stuck with the process. But the outcome is really the reason why we have any form of collaboration. So if we're talking about defining what kind of future we want for St. Louis, that must guide every decision that we make, that must guide the organizations that come to the table. And so coming to the table because of the mission of an organization is not a reason to collaborate. But coming to the table because of the outcome of the collaboration is a good reason to collaborate. So knowing what the outcome is, staying focused on the outcome is really what governs a successful collaboration.
I love this. I feel like we've built a rubric for collaboration here. When you get started, first some internal reflection, right? Be ready for vulnerability. Make sure you and your whole organization are ready. Be building those bridges and that trust before you even step into that collaborative room. Once you step into that collaborative room, begin to think about structure for that particular collaboration and what it looks like and what kind of outcomes are we going to be responsible for and who gets held accountable how for them. And then that final point I really like, stay focused on the outcome, stay focused on the goal. That's the thing everybody shares. I really love that as a just a kind of rubric and a model for collaboration, something we need a lot more for. So thank you for all of you for that collective wisdom. I really appreciate that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to popcorn a couple of questions at specific panelists about their specific work. And Dwayne, let's start with you. You've articulated a pretty ambitious goal to create health equity in the region in the next 12 years. Can you expand a little bit on what exactly you mean by health equity and how you are thinking to address the deep systematic issues that create these inequitable outcomes?
I said that. No, I'm laughing because, health equity makes me very happy. And so, yeah, I did. I said that we could achieve health equity here in 12 years. It perhaps could be done sooner. Okay. And as long as we're on the way to doing it, it will happen, whether it's 12 or 14 years. So regardless, being on the path is the most important thing. And I'll go back to the beginning of our discussion. Wally, you challenged us to imagine differences, right? So I'm going to challenge us to imagine that in the communities that we live in, that there are safe places for kids to play and be outside, and easy access to foods, that your community is safe and secure and you feel good at night. I'll challenge us to imagine that in our communities that we have easy access to a primary care provider, that the schools in our communities dispense high level education and our children, our students can learn in peace, right? I would challenge us to imagine that you live in a community where everyone who can work can have a job with good pay. And all of us can imagine those things. Some of us see it in our everyday lives, and there's so many of us who do not see it. And that's where we get to the point of equity, is making certain that all of us have that opportunity. So what's common about that list, though, is that everything on that list is a known health contributor. No, it's known to make health better, right? Okay, so that's the secret sauce to eliminating health disparities, is making certain that we live in places, that we are living in safe places where we love, learn, earn, play, earn, and shop, right? That our community and our environments are this way. And so when I think of a vision for health equity, that's what I'm looking for, is this ideal. Now, the definition for health equity that I use, and it's, I'm just gonna say it slowly. Health equity means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity for health and well-being, okay? And that means removing obstacles to health, such as poverty, discrimination, and their consequences, especially in the systems that affect our pay, our access to food, our quality of education, housing environments, and so forth, right? So this definition of health equity, one, points to the structural barriers of discrimination that are endemic in our work, trying to rid that from the systems and structures that there. The definition points to the social determinants of health systems, right? I think when the phrase was coined as social determinants of health, that it became misleading. It sounded like education is a social determinant of health. And so therefore, the more education you have, the more likely you are to be healthy. And that's not true. We know that African-American women with PhDs have the same chances of surviving pregnancy and having a child live past year 1 as a white woman with a high school diploma. So it's not the amount of education, it's the systems and what and how those systems relate to the individuals. The definition also is clear about the systems that need to change: education systems, public safety systems, income, employment, and wealth systems, community, social, and ecological environment systems, housing systems, transportation systems, and access to care systems. So it is a defined group of systems. So the word system should not be seen as, okay, now I still don't know what we're talking about. We do know what we're talking about here. And it calls out fair and just, implying that the systems that we have and the structures that we have that influence people's health outcomes are not fair and not just. And that's the hook, because the fairness and justice means that people need to push for the changes that we need to see, people who are interested in seeing fairness and justice in society. So when we think about a mutually shared goal of fairness and justice, now we can take a look at these systems and see how they're not working for us. We can never separate health equity from racial equity. They overlap to a large extent. They overlap. You can't take racial equity out of the picture for health equity. You cannot do it. It has to be right there, because on every health indicator that we want to eliminate a disparity for, once you look at the racial overlay of the health outcome, then you will see that people of color, and more than likely African-American and Indigenous people, are not faring as well as others in that. So you keep these things together no matter what. And others would want to say, well, what about gender equity? That's fine. Health equity, racial equity, now add gender equity in there, right? And then you will see that people of color, most likely African-Americans and Indigenous populations, are going to be on the low end of the success stick or whatever we're looking at. If you want to focus on disability equity, you can overlay that with gender equity and racial equity and health equity, and you're still going to see the same thing all the way through. This is why you never separate racial equity from health equity. Okay. Now, the best thing about health equity and equity in general is that when one wins, then everyone wins. But oftentimes we get caught in this trap of duality of language. So folks want to talk about health inequities. I have a hard time defining health inequities. I really do. I need help on that one. I need more thinking time to get into it. But I do know that a converse of health equity is structural racism. Because if you overlay race every time, then structural racism is really what we're trying to correct for, right? So when I say that we want to see health equity across this state in 12 years, I'm talking about a breaking down of structural racism, right? And making certain to break it down in the systems in which we do our work on behalf of folks out there. And I'm real clear, I'm easy with intersectional equity, being able to overlay health equity and racial equity with disability equity and gender equity. Intersectional equity is so very, very important, especially when you take a notion that, that was raised by Ibrahim Kendi, that African-American transgender women have a typical life expectancy of age 35. And so that's why you do the overlay, so you can see where the real problems are and where you need to do the work. I was silent on the question about elders and children or young people for one reason, is those are my teachers. Those are my teachers. Right. Elders are my teachers. Young people are my teachers. They are the ones that can, with clear eyes and vision, point to where systems have failed and where systems need to be corrected. But it was such a brief sentence. I didn't want to get into it there. So then it's about the how. Well, how do we do this? How do we achieve health equity here? Yesterday on the MFFH.org website. I do that because there's a little bit of a difference there. We put up a blog post about how to use health equity principles when thinking about how to distribute the billions of federal dollars that are coming in here to Missouri. And in brief, the first thing is we got to respect community power. That means engaging with people genuinely and authentically and using my teachers, okay, to help us lead the way forward. Secondly, follow the science. Data matters. We really need to go back to data and see what it is. But let's not be all hoity-toity about data. Okay, it's quantitative data, it's numbers, but it's also qualitative. It's lifting up those life stories, those experiences, those narratives, so that we can see how they go together in the picture. And then if we're going to generate data, let's do it right now. Okay, we know that there are many more genders than just binary genders, right? So when we're collecting gender information, let's be good about that. Let's make certain that we disaggregate by geography. Okay, even down to the 9-digit zip code if you can. Let's make certain that we disaggregate our data by the ethnic groups. Okay, our Latino people come from all over. Right? And so thinking of them as one people, or our Asian American people, or our Pacific Islander American people, or even our indigenous tribes as one people, the more we can break it down, the more useful the information is to getting change where change is needed in particular. The other thing we talked about already, building power through collaboration. Very, very important to do. And then we had to reimagine what change looks like and remove the barriers. And then that's the beginning of getting on a path to health equity. So using the dollars that are coming into the state and applying very basic health equity principles tells you where those dollars should go. Tells you exactly how you should distribute them, because the lens about equity is about fairness and justice. And if you're always leaning back on fairness and justice, then it takes out some of the other distractions that are out there that might keep us from being fair or being just. So I think we can do that. I've got a dedicated staff. They are top professionals. They are mission driven, and we're here to help. But we also know that we can't do it alone, and that's why it's important to build power with others in order to be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we got a definition of health equity there, and it sounds like to fix some of it, we have to fix all of it, and that seems to be the nature of systems, right? That's absolutely.
That's right.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. We have 30 minutes left, and I do want to get to some questions from the audience. But Karlos, you've got a great amount of experience working to ensure that the business community does not leave communities of color behind. Your new role in the banking industry gives you an opportunity to address these questions from a different angle. What lessons will you be bringing to the table to address the number of households of color that are unbanked, face mortgage and lending discrimination, and other financial barriers to success?
You know, fortunately, the bank, I was actually already on the board of the bank in 2018 to recently, and I had worked with the previous chairman as well as the current chairman to talk about some of the areas that we needed to look at, or the banks that needed to look at. And so they had already implemented the I-10 lending. They had been trying to hire some bilingual people. So it really, for me, you know, the principles that have been implemented were in many ways already implemented before I got here. So that's credit to the bank. That being said, since that time, now it's on me to help educate them and hold them accountable. You know, when we're talking about having bilingual employees, well, if we have a position open at a branch, you have a bilingual candidate and you have a non-bilingual candidate, well, we need to put a little bit more emphasis on that bilingual candidate. They can still give you the English, but now they're just going to be able to bring the Spanish. You know, and so when we're talking about, you know, affirmative action or anything like that, you know, we want to talk about what is our end goal, what are we trying to do? We're not saying we only need to hire people of color, but all things being equal, what do we need at the bank? Well, we need bilingual people because that's going to help me to be successful in my job, and it's going to help the bank be able to carry out some of their products like ITIN lending. And so for me, it's holding them accountable there, but then also educating them on the nuances of the Hispanic community. We know that the Mexican population is by far the largest population of Hispanics in the metro area, followed by Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Spaniards, which blows me away, and then Colombians. And then we have a growing population of Venezuelans, which I imagine are probably next on that list. So knowing that, and so, you know, knowing that some of the terminology used by a Mexican can mean something completely different and maybe offensive for a Puerto Rican. So knowing that information is helpful. Also knowing that Latin America does not understand or does not go by the concept of FDIC. If I have my money deposited at branch A and branch A get robbed, my money is gone. You know, so that FDIC concept doesn't work. So for us, it's really getting the Hispanic population to also understand this is part of the culture here. FDIC does exist. These banking products, you know, that we're implementing are here to help you. You know, the payday lending, we're trying to implement some other loans that will be at a much more favorable, smaller amounts, but much more favorable. So the people that are getting the payday lending don't go into that vicious cycle where they can never get out of it. You know, in addition to that, we're adding different small amount of loans, whereas you're going to use it to build your credit. You know, so that you can just start to build credit and even educating. We've led, not only have we participated in over 5,000 community service hours as a bank this past year, we also led 3,000 different classes for financial literacy. And I think that as an American, financial literacy is one of the most important things. Now, I know there's a lot of conversations about credit scores and, you know, the validity of those, but until that is sorted out, one of the most important things that us as Americans need to know is financial literacy. It's extremely important and crucial to who we are because it's in many ways our reputation. You know, and each family that opens an account can save up to $1,000 on fees just by having a relationship with a bank. So it's really educating the bank about our community and the fact that, you know, Hispanics are as similar as an American, an Irishman, an Englishman, a New Zealander, an Australian. You know, they all speak English, but they are different continents. They are different cultures. You know, they are different traditions. So there are 23 different countries that make up Latin America. You know, so I think really getting them to get them educated in those nuances, I think is important. And that's what I think I'm hoping I'm going to be able to bring to the table, as well as, of course, because I know a lot of people that are not just Hispanic, being able to bring other people to the table. So, and getting them to understand how do we work together to make sure that we're helping everybody rise together.
Powerful point about cultural competency in institutions, and especially in the part of the institution that's front-facing, that's customer-facing, right? Whether you're in banking, whether you're in the arts, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in social services, if someone walks in and sees someone relatable behind the desk, they're gonna have a better experience. They're gonna get more out of that. So yeah, really appreciate that point. All right, I'm going to move to you. St. Louis has a long history of becoming a refuge for immigrants from around the world, a long and proud history, I'd like to say. In particular, right now, we're expecting an influx of Afghani refugees for which you've already completed a very spectacularly successful household item donation drive. Congratulations on that. But what does this influx of new St. Louisans look like in reality? And what are going to be the biggest determinants for successfully integrating them into the St. Louis community?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to start by by thanking the community. The community has come out, has lived up to the moment. I knew that this community had, really supported immigrants, but no one could have imagined that it was going to play out like this. So I really want to say, wanted to go on record that we're truly grateful for the support. In terms of how we're going to measure success, I would say that we're going to be successful as a community the moment we go beyond thinking about these new arrivals as Afghans to thinking of them as members of this community, as our friends, as our neighbors, as classmates to our children, as our colleagues, because that's what needs to happen. As we look at arrivals coming into the community, the question that we must always ask ourselves is, why do we have to welcome people? I'm going to go with my African quote here that I use a lot, is that there's an African quote that a child that's not welcome into the village will one day burn down the village for the village to feel its warmth. And it's really important for us to, as a community, to be embracing. And since I started out at the International Institute, I know that we are a resettlement agency, we resettle refugees, and we provide support to immigrants. And I keep asking everybody in the conversations that I have is, why are we doing this work? We're doing this work not just because we have a heart for refugees and immigrants, but because of this community, because these people too have a role to play in defining the future of the community. And until we can see them beyond the lenses of refugees and immigrants, we as a community will not tap into the benefit of having the diversity that is needed for us to be a prosperous and progressive society. So that to me is how we are going to determine it. And I'm pleading with the community that has done incredibly well in preparing to welcome people, that this cannot just be a welcome or a handshake. It has to be an embrace. It has to be a walk. We have to run together, and we have to give those people the opportunity to help us become more prosperous as a community. That's how we're going to succeed in this endeavor.
I really appreciate that point, that resettlement is not charity, right? Resettlement is an American duty and also something that's going to grow and benefit our community. Where is the population growth coming from in the region right now? Right? Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. All right. Vanessa, we'll move on to you. So the Regional Arts Commission has an exciting new vision for the region to provide a, quote, full creative life for every St. Louisan. I love that. So closing in on your first year of leading RAC, how do you think this vision benefits the region both in the short and the long term? And share your thoughts on the role artists play in achieving that vision.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. There are two primary, well, first, let me say, what does a full creative life for every St. Louisan? Because we benefit from being part of the human species. You know, we're not trees or cats or dogs, we're humans. So we get to do that for this go round. Creativity is our birthright, right? And so we're going to create something every day. And my hope is a full creative life for every St. Louisan means that we are creating beautiful communities. We are solving our problems by thinking outside of the box. I mean, from a business perspective, some of the most in-demand talent are those that think creatively, bring color, bring word to an environment, to a culture. And I think that when we think about our community and what we envision, we're really talking about the culture that we want to experience. And what we know for sure is that jobs and money alone do not create community. I mean, that's available anywhere, but when you go to a city to visit that has a certain vibe or music, dance, you know, that's what brings us together. And what we know for sure in this region is that fragmentation, segregation, othering, exclusion just doesn't work for us. And really embracing and leveraging arts and culture and artists in particular, and ensuring that artists are part of our conversation, whether it's health, business, brings us together in a way that is unique, helps to shape the narrative, helps to influence what we say about ourselves and why and who we are. And so RAC's role is to invest in that. And data is important, absolutely, but it's the story, it's the narrative that make a difference. We want to live in a beautiful community. So it's the art that we share and we express. People will literally travel across the world to see art, right? And to experience community with others. And as we invite new residents to St. Louis, what's a better way to get to know them than through their music, through their dance, through their food, right? To build relationship. Everything that we talked about in terms of moving this region forward is grounded in relationship. And what the arts and culture sector does, whether it's our theater companies or our dance companies, is create an environment for people to come together and practice being together and defining who we are and expressing our values. And so for young people, for our elders, and for ourselves, as we have ideas and problems and solutions for those problems, arts and culture is the platform to bring that to life. It's having a vision, and I will say this because it, particularly as it relates to young people, we have to invest in their creativity. And don't tell a young person who says, I want to be a dancer or a filmmaker, don't be a starving artist, go get a real job. There's nothing more real than to have a vision and do what it takes to collaborate and bring that vision to life and manifest it into something real. And so I encourage us to think broadly and take an arts and approach. One of the things that makes Peloton special is the community and the music, right? One of the things that helps grow our tech economy is art and music. If you have one of these, you're pretty much looking at visual art and performing art all day in one way, shape, whether it's the meme or the Facebook post. So art is an essential part of our lives. And I just want RAC to continue to champion that and help people think about creativity as our birthright and what will move us forward, because it's the manifestation of our culture.
Thank you for that. I love the thought, create a beautiful community. And what it brought up in my mind is not community with art, but community as art. An entire community as a collaborative piece of imaginative, creative expression, which is a really interesting way of thinking about community. Thank you for that. So I'm going to thank you. Some really, really thoughtful, thought-provoking answers to these questions. I'm going to go ahead and bring us to some questions that we're getting from the audience. I want to remind the audience, you can give us some feedback. We're going to come back to that Mentimeter stuff at the end of the session for just a couple of minutes. But also, if you have questions, go ahead and stick them in the Q&A. I'm going to start with a question we have here from Cool Tie Hunter, which is an interesting point. He says, many times when, quote, vulnerability is mentioned, advised, or requested, it comes in the presence of judgment. How is the idea of acknowledging, navigating, and or removing the judgment barriers spoken to, requested, or accounted for? How are we championing the removal of that judgment if we're going to ask folks to come out and be vulnerable? I think that's a really, really great, really good question. Tough one to answer. Who wants to jump in? Karlos.
I think this goes back to some of the leadership training you get. And I think that because some of this, it has to do with our own insecurities, that if I'm being judged, well, am I really being judged? I mean, is that true? I don't know if that's true, but it's my own insecurity that's coming into play. But I think that the answer is also within the question is we need to address it. and we need to understand that we're all human, and that if someone's coming to the table with vulnerability, that we need to make sure that we kind of check our judgment as best we can, but so it's kind of a twofold. I think I have to have enough confidence to know that, I need to just know that maybe they're not judging me. It's my own insecurity. But at the same time, that let's say someone does bring up a good counterpoint, well, it's being able to accept that. And then how do you go from there? What are the next steps then to make sure that, because you're vulnerable and let's say you get exposed, that doesn't mean don't be vulnerable anymore. How do you fix that? And being able to decipher, is it judgmental or is it true? Maybe it's both, but you take the true, what can I own from that truth? How do I change it? And, so I think it comes from two different angles, but I think we have to be strong enough leaders, still vulnerable, and still be able to be truthful with whatever the criticism or judgment was, and then be able to grow from there.
What can I own of that truth? I'm writing that down because I love that phrase. I think that's an important thought. All right.
Well, I would say that if we all had the answers, then we wouldn't have challenges. And I think that as a leader, recognizing one that you don't have the answers, and that the process of arriving at the best solution may actually mean failing along the way, and allowing yourself, yes, people will judge you, but you have little control over the judgment that people have. The most important thing is focusing on what has to be achieved for the community, irrespective of how people see it or approach it. We cannot be defined by the judgment that people have of us. We have to be defined by the outcome that we seek for everyone in the community. And I think that's how I would approach it.
Thank you.
I don't know any vulnerable people who are alive. Right? I know people who are thriving, and I know people who are thriving with challenges, but they are thriving. I wouldn't go so far as to say resilient, because resilient doesn't always work either, and there's judgments implied in that too. Resilient can also be used to say, hey, I know your people have been oppressed for 400 years, but you seem to be doing all right. Right? So you're resilient, and that's not quite a compliment, but because I see power in people, I see people as thriving, and and I think if you come at it from a perspective, it's still a judgment, okay, that I'm making, but at least I'm making a judgment on an asset as opposed to a debit, and not at the expense of someone else. I use banking terms for my friend Karlos.
Thank you for that, Dwayne. I want to push back a little bit and bring us back to Kultai's question here, in part because what he's asking for at the end, it seems like to me, is how can we, in a productive and maybe non-destructive way, hold those who are judging accountable? So instead of putting it all on the folks who are being vulnerable, like the folks that are out there doing that judging and doing it explicitly, and maybe they're doing it in a space that your organization has created. Is there a way to do that?
I think that there is. It's calling the question, understanding from which the judgment comes, because I think, to your point, it's about judgment, which in some instances can be connected back to culture and bullying. And how do you address a bully? Very directly, right? And that doesn't go away until it's addressed, right? And we see that in our workplaces, we see that in our homes. I think for the person on the receiving end, it's having the support, the courage, because it's not easy addressing, bullying by any strength of the measure. So I think to Karlos's point, it's assessing, okay, is this constructive criticism? Is this someone who's trying to help me grow? Or is this just outright bullying that, I need to get my posse together and address accordingly? But as long as we let things go that need to be addressed, nobody wins. Nobody won recess with the bully on the playground, right? And so it's being able to find support and the courage to address it. And usually it can be dismantled so we can move on. But those obstacles, you know, we can't just let them sit and think that we'll make progress.
Thank you, Vanessa. So I'm going to move on. We got another question from the audience here. Edward Bryant is asking, quote, I think this is from you, Dwayne, using the dollars that are coming into the state. And he's kind of riffing on that and saying, unfortunately, we have a state general assembly and governor who don't want to spend money on the types of things most vulnerable people in our state and region need. What are your thoughts to addressing our state and federal legislators and get them to support investments in people in our state?
Yeah, that was me again, huh? I said that. Yeah, no, it's you know, the answer is not a good one, because the truth is we have to prepare for these crises before they come. And this is a moment that's upon us right now. And if we don't feel like we have the leaders who are the right leaders to stand up for the people, then we need to do something about the leaders that are there, which we can do with a vote. So I want to be very, very clear, in case anybody thinks I mean anything else. Use the power of the ballot to do that. But in this moment right now, I think what we have to do is find a way to support the people to take the messages to the politicians in a very vibrant way, okay, to let them know that they're being watched, that they will be held accountable, and to let them know the thoughts that we may have on how those dollars could be spent. Talking to politicians and leaders sometimes gets you nowhere whatsoever. But once you have their attention, being able to show that the reality of what we're living also is reflective in the data, and being able to do that. Data only gets you so far. And then after that, you have to go back at them with passion in order to get it changed. But in the meantime, since we now find ourselves in this situation right now, what are we doing to groom the next generation of leaders who will be more responsive to the people? COVID is just one of several disasters that we will see into our future. So then how do we start getting prepared? This idea of always being ready so you don't have to get ready, that's what we need to do. We need to find ways to be prepared for these changes that are coming on. But if we don't have the leaders who are there to help us in the ways that we want to be helped, there are plenty of people who do, but we need to make certain that we don't fall for the okie doke, and that we be intentional about grooming the leaders that we want to see lead us into the future.
I'd like to add one quick point to this answer. Governance and citizenship is a contact sport, and it is an ongoing endeavor. When you vote, that is one part of the process. The entire process is being educated about what the issues are, voting, and then staying on them, right? Even if you vote for a great elected official, you still have to show up. And then that's where I take the U+2, right? So going to the elected official online, in person, bring people with you. It is not a private enterprise. It's a public engagement that is ongoing. And we as the citizenry have to stay on it in the same way that we take care of ourselves and our families. We have to build that into our daily practices, engaging with elected officials to hold them accountable. It's not just a one and done situation that we do every 2 or 4 years. It has to be a daily practice.
I appreciate that point. I'm hearing two things. Number one, the fundamental underlying point I'm hearing is leaders aren't necessarily just spokespeople who show up to speak on behalf. They have to become themselves pathways for the citizens to bring their stories, bring their perspectives, bring their needs to leadership. And also Dwayne's powerful point about take the long-term view. If you don't like the current leaders, train the next ones and put them in place and then hold them accountable, as Vanessa said, once they get there. I really appreciate that point. Hopefully, Ed, we answered your question. Did anybody else want to weigh in on that? Okay. All right, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to bring us we asked the audience to give us a little feedback here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we asked the audience, are you seeing that word cloud now? Good, perfect. We asked the audience, what do you see as the biggest challenges for positive civic change in St. Louis over the next 5 years? Racism, big right there in the center. Infrastructure, inequity, crime, education, choices. That's an interesting one. Municipalities, parochialism. That's another one with a lot in there. Disinformation, well-being. That's really fascinating. Any thoughts from the panel on this? Just something that screams out at you that pokes a thought in you.
I think the consistent theme is people in relationship. You know,
Okay.
that's what got us to lack thereof, people with limited relationships. But at the end of the day, you can connect at the core. This is about people and their relationships.
Wow, yeah. The municipalities, parochialism, systemic racism, division. You're right. It's all about relationships. Absolutely. All right.
In addition to what Vanessa just said, I'm sorry, Arrey, did I cut you off? I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I also think a lot of the answers on here are things that notoriously St. Louis has been dealing with. Something has to change.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, I was going to go in the same line as Karlos, that I see a lot of opportunity out of these challenges. These are the opportunities because you can see that we know what the challenges are.
I love it. Where the disease is worse, the resistance grows strongest. Absolutely. And that actually brings us right to our next word cloud here. What are the biggest opportunities for positive civic change? And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Arrey. A lot of these are the flip side of what we saw in the challenges, right? Instead of division, we have collaboration. Instead of disinformation, we have civic engagement. Instead of disconnectedness, we have belonging, inclusion, location, innovation, investment, vision, engagement, strong leadership, creativity, imagination. I love that. And then I'm just going to bring us, because we've got just about a minute left, a couple of thoughts that were that folks from the audience added in. St. Louis region needs an intentional focus on regional collaboration, and I think we've hit that subject pretty well. I'm generally hopeful but concerned that St. Louis sometimes gets in our own way. I can appreciate that sentiment. We have to take an asset-based community development approach. I think that person's agreeing with a lot of the points we've made about it's our people, it's our region, it's our art, it's our resources that are going to allow us to be successful. Fantastic. So thanks to the audience for helping out and sharing with us there. And with that, unfortunately, we have run out of time with these amazing leaders. So a huge thank you to Vanessa, Arrey, Dwayne, and Karlos for sharing your time and expertise and energy and ideas with us today. Our region is lucky to have all of you. I just want to remind you that we're all looking to you to fix everything. But also have one other thank you. I'm going to say again to the Incarnate Word Foundation for sponsoring our focus forums. If you're interested in focus, please go ahead and become a member today. You can easily do that on our website. Keep an eye out for our forums coming up. Those are listed on our website. I've got a little preview there. We've actually, it's not public yet, but in November, we're going to be having a forum. The tentative title is Diversity, Pedagogy, and Community in St. Louis Region Schools. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be interesting. So thank you all. Thanks to our audience for being here today. And with that, Mike, roll the outro music.